There's a question. There's an answer. Oh! Bit of a dodgy question here. Well, today should be kind of nice because the entire video is going to take place right here by the piano. This is how I write a melody. I've been so excited to have the Bluthner back in another video. So the man himself, Hans Zimmer, once said that a good melody is one where you can play it with one finger. I am not quite that pro level. I think a lot of the melodies that I play you probably need maybe two, perhaps three. But anyway, what I'm going to be talking about today is not so much the instrument choice that I use, because that kind of comes later, nor is it going to be actually the chords and accompaniment so much. They do kind of link together because sometimes the decisions you make on a melody will be affected by the chords that you have chosen. But for the most part, I'm just going to be focusing on a note-by-note main theme, essentially. It might be the same for you, it might be different, but I find that I never just have a complete theme pop into my head one day. I'll always have like maybe 3 notes to start off with, and then I'll build it up from there if they're a good 3 notes. And in the case of today, I've got this tiny little fragment of a melody which I'd like to build on and turn into a main theme, which I will then hopefully use in this new album that I'm making. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by playing it kind of as it's sounding in my head so far with chords, and then I'll just strip it down to the theme itself. So that's it, and I definitely think it's a little bit more complicated than some of the other themes that I've had spark an idea in the past. Not that it's particularly important, but this is in a pentatonic scale, which means we were only using 5 out of the 8 notes in the octave. So the whole octave in C major is... And the pentatonic scale, the 5 notes in question are... A lot of my music uses this scale because it does sound quite kind of pleasant. And for reference as well, you'll get the same scale just by playing all the black notes on the piano and nothing else. I think there's something intrinsically tuned in the human ear that likes pentatonic scale. And the other thing to mention as well is that it's in 6/8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When it comes to actually coming up with a good, strong theme, I think it's more a case of imagining it as if it were like a statement. If you were to sing it, would it sort of sound satisfying to your ears? And to do that, I think it needs to be quite balanced. So the thing that I've noticed at the moment is that we've got a bit too much. If you had a whole song of that, it would get quite boring quite quickly. So the next part of it, or maybe the part before it, needs to be a different rhythm perhaps. And then we kind of go from a high note down to a low note. So we maybe want to sort of go against that as well. And then my chords are really simple. So we've got the 6th chord of the scale, which is A minor. Chord 1, which is of course C. Chord 5, which is G. And chord 4, which is F. And yeah, it's sort of lilting a bit like a song. It's not particularly upbeat sounding. To me, it sounds like we need to maybe bring in some other darker chords as well to add to that, but not have it be too melancholic. It should have a little bit of hopefulness to it as well. Da 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 da. I might try a different chord to what I originally chose. So instinctually, I just sort of went, which is the same chord sequence, I just didn't go all the way down to an F at the end. I could maybe use a chord 2. Or perhaps chord 3. I just don't particularly think that's that great a melody. It kind of came to me, but I'm going to try something else anyway. Let's go back to the drawing board. Da 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 da. Not sure about the notes, but I quite like the rhythm. Let's try that again with something else. Oh. Again, pentatonic, quite nice. Ooh, okay. I was gonna just play the same thing twice, but I reckon something else happened there. Let's try that again. Ooh, okay, yeah. So there, chord 4 with note 2 in the scale, in this case a D, which has quite a kind of wistful sound to it, I think. Quite a nice way to balance out the very kind of... Everything so far is very in scale, so to balance that out with something that's still very pentatonic, but kind of mixes it up a little bit. We used chord 3, chord 4. The chords on their own this time. Really simple, but just varying it up a little bit. And I might perhaps actually try going down instead, so maybe this time I'll go... Again, a 7th chord there. So a little bit of colour. That's almost like a first half, or it could be a first quarter, depending on how sort of long you're going to make the theme. We've had a lot of movement down here. I just have the feeling now that we kind of want to rise up again and sort of soar. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, that sounded kind of cool. Again, all about kind of contrast, starting with da 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 da, and then da da da. So much longer notes now, and I think that works rather well. Da, 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 da. Well, the one thing that I can say that I'm certain about at this point is that I very much like that final chord, which leads us back to the beginning again, which was chord 3, but I had a D over it. Again with that note 2. There's been a lot of leaning on that supertonic in this new bit of the melody, hasn't there? Because if you listen... Da, 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 and then holding it onto the 6th chord, A minor. Da, it's quite nice, but I do wonder if I need to maybe not use it so much of a crutch. It is sounding a little bit winter songing, isn't it? Because winter song just goes straight down from that A note, so maybe I could try going up instead. Nice, I quite like that. It's gradually sort of massaging. Is it massaging? Oh, I don't know if it's massaging so much. Maybe it's more kind of like fucking hammering the melody into place. That's it, I've forgotten it now. This is the part that I can't really teach. Part of my brain just wanted to go da 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 da, which is adding a dotted rhythm, a dotted meaning a note and a half. So you had sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then over the top was 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. I'm not musically well versed enough to explain dotted rhythms to you, but you kind of get how it's almost has a feeling of dance to it where you're sort of skipping over the beat a little bit, and really nice because so far everything rhythm-wise has just been straight on the beat, so it's nice to have that mixed up a little bit. And now it's about this point where I've played the same bit too many times that I kind of feel the need to go from the top again, so let me try that. I think it feels a little bit still like it's two separate halves, and I think that's because I transition from one to the other quite quickly. And this is made more apparent, not so much because of the melody, which admittedly does go from being quite quick to being quite slow, but also the chords as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2 chords per bar. Whereas in the second half, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That builds us back up nicely into the beginning, which is then. So I think what I might actually do is double the length of both of these sections. Essentially play the same thing twice, but what I'll do now at this point is just let my hand wander and see if anything happens. Yeah, that sounded along the right lines now. We gave each part a little bit more time to breathe, the fast bit and a slower bit. I think it's around here that I need it to change just a tiny bit. So the second da-da-da, da-da-da can stay, but then I need something to be a little bit different. By doing that, that sort of it tapes over that sectional gap between this very first melodic idea and the second. We've actually completely lost the... But that's not necessarily so bad a thing. I think out of all the melodies, that one is the one that feels the most natural to change. The important part really is the... That is our motif of the piece. Let me try that again. That's quite nice. And then we don't actually repeat the F major chord. Up we go. When When you get towards the end of a section or the end of a melody, we sort of build up, reach a peak, and then descend again. And whether that's more of a steep climb and then goes down gently or vice versa is really up to you. In this instance, we're building the melody simply by adding a little bit more what's called dissonance, where I'm using more notes that aren't necessarily within the chord. This one's particularly interesting because it's a B, and B really doesn't belong with F major. But it's quite nice because it adds a bit of tension, which we can then relieve by moving it up, making it what's called a passing note. We then go up and it makes that C all the more satisfying. But, I forgot what I did here. So, we actually relieved the tension there for a second by moving the chord instead. That B goes into G major nicely. No dissonance there. And again, I keep moving the melody to create a little bit of tension, not so much tension this time. What essentially we're doing is we're sort of going tension, release, tension, release. And that is where we have hit our peak, and now we're going to descend again. And by making this video, I've now accidentally written a melody. Okay, quick little tangent again to talk about something else. Traditionally, when I wrote melodies, I would stray away from going much further than an octave in range, because I always felt like if you want the French horns to play it, it needs to stick within this 8-note margin. But more recently, I've come to realise that that doesn't always have to strictly be the case. You can go from one instrument to another, which hands the melody over. And so as a result, the register can change quite dramatically throughout a piece. It can still technically be the same notes, maybe an octave up, but it also could be a way that's written that it couldn't ever work unless it went up in scale. So in this case, it would not work if I went like this. I mean, it does work, but it's not quite the same pinnacle of emotion as the... Because we're now an octave and a note, so a ninth, above our original C key. And again, tension that needs to be relieved because it doesn't belong in that chord. So, start at the beginning of the phrase again and just see where my hand takes me. Ooh, that got a bit interesting there, didn't it? All over the place. So hang on. So yeah, definitely I'm going to do that again because that note repetition is similar to the melody that we had before. We're dividing this melody down into like two big halves, and then within those two big halves are quarters, and those quarters have kind of got to then be divided into 2/8, I think. Yes, which is where we are at the moment. And I think those 2/8 need to be kind of similar to each other. Two very different halves. Each of those halves is divided into two sort of similar quarters, and then those two quarters are 2/8 with a tiny bit of difference between them. In this case, it's... Now, because we're at the end of this quarter, it's time to make it significantly different. And just checking to make sure that it then works if we then go back to the beginning. That works too. Again, my hand just did its own thing there. That might work too with the repetition. it's a bit too much. Da da da. Okay, so let's try something a bit more simple. And I think that's kind of good. I might have to go from the top again and see how well I remember it. Normally, I would refer back to my voice memos that I'd taken, but because it's all on the cameras and I can't get up to play it back. I forgot so much at the end there. Oh, I promise it's a lot easier than it is when you're trying to do it in front of a camera as well. But I think we are nearly there. I really actually did like that to a, when we transitioned from the first half to the second half. I really like that. And just to jazz it up a little bit more, I might just try making it a D major, which is a little bit more unusual. To make it a D major, we have to raise the F to an F sharp, which isn't found in the C major scale at all, but it kind of works, provided we then transition away to the F. I have to say, my favourite ever use of this chord is in How to Train Your Dragon. So, okay, I think for now that'll do just fine. And I mean, honestly, that's kind of a good starting point. I would then take this into Logic and start mucking around with it on the computer as well, trying it out in different instruments, and then maybe adjusting the notes based on that. But as a starting point, I'm actually quite happy with this. So I'm looking forward to translating that into something a bit more tangible. Thank you very much for watching. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is probably the last Patreon video that I will be pre-making before I actually open it and go live. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Do let me know what your feedback is for what you'd like me to do next. I've got other videos in the works, of course, but it's always nice to hear suggestions. And if there is a consensus, I will make sure to take that into account. So great. Thank you. And I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.